Generalised anxiety disorder, social anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder and body dysmorphic disorder. Anxiety is both a normal part of all our lives as human beings and also something that can become problematic. So evolution, we wouldn't have evolved as a species without anxiety, and none of us can live without anxiety, but it can tip over into becoming something that's problematic or becoming a disorder.
I'm 21, I'm originally from Bradford, but I go to Kingston now. I'm a third year creative writing and media studies student, and I suffer from generalised anxiety disorder and PTSD. On the 26th of August 2009, my mum was killed in a car accident by a drunk driver. She had gone out for a meal with her friends and I was staying up to wait for her, and then obviously she didn't come home. As she was driving home, like I said, they'd stolen a car, they were on like drugs, alcohol and everything under the sun, and crashed into them, and I was kind of the one to realise and then try and go looking for her. So yeah, but she was I know it's very cliche, but she was my absolute best friend.
The symptoms of anxiety are not the same for everyone, and everyone has an individual sort of anxious response. But broadly, there are some things that people may have in common, things like nausea, feeling very dizzy, headaches, feeling lightheaded. A heartbeat can become irregular or very strong or very fast. You can have difficulty sleeping, difficulty eating. So there's a whole range of different physical symptoms. And there are also psychological symptoms, and they can be things like feeling particularly tense, nervous, this sort of sense of dread, unable to concentrate, lacking in motivation, feeling quite numb. So both physical and psychological symptoms, really.
At 17, I got held up at gunpoint whilst working in an office in Wakefield. They aggressively held a gun to my head and told me to get under the table. They consequently scared the living daylights out of me. We got under the table, the people left with the money, and consequently now, because they were wearing masks and boiler suits, I now can no longer face anybody that wears a mask, and Halloween is definitely out of the question. In November 1995, my husband and I separated. I had an 18-month-old and a newborn baby, which obviously was very hard both emotionally and financially. Although the split was only for a short period of time, it still was very, very hard. In July, my husband and myself decided that the marriage was worth fighting for, so we sat down and talked to each other, and we became a couple again, which made our marriage stronger.
So I've always been an anxious person, and when I think about it, I've probably suffered from anxiety, probably from my teenage years, but it was properly diagnosed and started becoming a major problem during my first year of uni. When most people were like planning parties and planning which clubs they were going to go to and stuff, I was planning the ways that I could escape from the parties that were in my flat and planning the excuses that I could use that I hadn't used before so I could get out of it all.
Someone really struggling with anxiety can face challenges in all aspects of their lives. So from sleeping, eating, going to work, feeling motivation, concentration, every aspect of someone's life can be hampered by an anxiety disorder or by severe anxiety.
I think a lot of the time in the media and things like that, it gets quite trivialised. There's a difference between being anxious and having anxiety. Like being a little bit anxious over sort of waiting for a phone call for an interview or things like that, that's pretty normal and that's what's expected. But what isn't like normal and what separates being anxious from having actual anxiety is things like being kept awake at night because of something that you have to do tomorrow, or feeling so sick that you have to cancel plans with friends and stuff. I think that's the difference.
There is a lot of stigma still, I think, in our society about mental health problems generally. Hopefully less so, and I think part of the reduction in stigma has been there have been cultural changes, and I think celebrities and people in the public eye who've actually sort of come out and said, I'm experiencing particular mental health problems has helped to develop a bit more acceptance of mental health problems. But there is still stigma, and there's both an external stigma and a sort of internal stigma that we all carry. I think that the voices that we have in our heads saying, stop being weak, get on with it, get on with life, there's plenty better off than you, all those sort of things that we say to ourselves can actually, they're almost us stigmatising ourselves.
Some days I get up and I'm bouncing and I think life's wonderful. Other days I get up without a trigger and just think, what am I going to do? How am I going to get through the day? How I generally get through it is I go to work, and luckily I've got a fantastic friend there, and I'll just say I'm having a bad day and she's there to support me and she'll keep an eye on me. And if I feel myself getting anxious, I now talk to myself. Yeah, I know it sounds dead weird, but it works. Talk to myself and basically say, what's the worst that can happen? Is that really going to happen?
Generally, my anxiety means that pretty much anything can make me anxious. When I am, one of my worst things was heart palpitations. However, now they're under control because of the medication I'm on. Racing thoughts is one of mine. I am generally quite a negative person when it comes to my anxiety, so I will spiral downwards, and once I start thinking something, that's it. I will get stuck on that and then just keep thinking that until I can break out of it. I went back into counselling in second year when I'd come back from home. They essentially told me that I had a form of post-traumatic stress disorder from everything that had happened to Mum, and they suggested that I tried the rewind technique. This is where you get put into a kind of state of hypnosis and you imagine yourself in a happy place, which is kind of the happiest you've been in the last sort of few years. And from there, you watch the traumatic event. So for me, it was my mum's car crash. You essentially rewind and fast forward through that event to kind of show your subconscious that you have the power and you're in control of it, and that you went from a state of calm at the beginning to kind of a state of calm at the end, or like when the event had finished, and that it won't hurt you anymore. I was really, really apprehensive about it at first, to be honest, because the second that she mentioned hypnosis, I was like, what? But I stayed very, very open-minded, and at first I didn't think there was any difference, and I was a little bit disappointed. But then after a few weeks and a few months passed, I realised that I actually wasn't as anxious anymore, and things such as headaches were just headaches and they weren't a brain tumour, and I could ring people a lot easier, and I was starting to gain a bit more confidence in class and things like that. So I am really glad that I did it.
The most recent relapse was September 2015, where all of a sudden I just really didn't want to get out of bed, didn't want to go to work, didn't want to socialise. I tried to deal with it myself, and then I had a major blowout with my husband, basically being really horrible. To be fair, I'm surprised I'm still married, but luckily for me, my husband loves me, and so he stuck by me, supported me. I went to doctors, which is why now I'm on medication. I take citalopram, 20 milligrams and a 10 milligram on a morning, and I also take Mitsofen that I take on an evening. I have been offered counselling, which I am actually beginning to come to terms with.
The process, once someone goes to a GP, is obviously going to vary according to the individual and also to a degree where the individual lives. But there is hopefully in most places a process of sort of stepped care. And for a lot of people it may be just going to the GP, talking to the GP and having the GP acknowledge that this person is struggling with anxiety and giving some sort of fairly basic, sort of simple suggestions about how to deal with that and how to cope with anxiety. Someone may move on if that's not sort of working to sort of more psychological interventions that could be group work, sort of psychoeducational groups or individual sort of guided self-help. And that may help, and in a lot of cases it will. If not, then it may be that the GP will suggest or make referrals for a more sort of high-intensity psychological intervention, such as sort of CBT and or sort of medication that can help reduce anxiety. And in a very small number of cases, then people may actually receive much more intensive, highly specialist sort of treatment involving drugs and psychotherapeutic approaches, and move into the sort of specialist mental health services. crisis services, day hospitals, and in very rare cases, sort of inpatient admission.
The coping mechanisms are generally talking to a very close friend. She helps me a lot. If Charlotte's at home, that's my daughter, I talk to her a lot. She supports me a lot by giving me advice and we bounce off each other.
I think one of the biggest things that I've learned over the past few years is my own boundaries in what I can and can't deal with. As I've said before, I'm really, really grateful for my friends because they understand that and they will either come with me or just let me step out and do my own thing and then come back and join whatever we're doing at the time. One of my biggest coping mechanisms is music in all forms. If I am heading to something that I really don't want to do or I'm really anxious about, then I'll be listening to my favourite songs. I also like having things to look forward to, and I go to a lot of concerts, like a lot. So having that in moments where I'm really panicking is often really good to focus on. Over the last few years, I've really got into the genre of a cappella. It first started with watching YouTube videos just as a bit of a hobby, and then it kind of manifested into something that was really actively passionate about. I then actually helped to start our university's first a cappella group called the Kingstones. That again has been one of the biggest challenges I have ever faced, but I absolutely adore it. Like, I can't even explain how much I love it. I've created a whole new family away from home, and every week I know that no matter what's happening outside of my own life, that I can go into this a cappella bubble and just be surrounded by people who all share the same love.
Upon a star makes no difference who you are. Anything your heart desires will come to you. Da da da, like a bolt out of the blue. Fate steps in and sees you through. When you wish upon a star, your dream comes true.
I think first of all, validate what the person's feeling, acknowledge what they're feeling, what they're thinking, acknowledge that this can be incredibly tough for people. Get alongside them, support them, encourage them.
When you're anxious, you probably get like certain things stuck in your head, and regardless of how many times people reassure you of something, you're going to think the same thing. I would say don't say certain things like it's all in your head, because that person kind of knows and it'll probably make them feel a little bit more stupid. But be there for them in any way that you can, even if it's just sitting and watching a film or like taking them for a drink or anything, just let them know that you're there for them. When I left treatment, I was absolutely terrified, to be honest with you. I think without even knowing it, I'd become safe under the knowledge that I had someone to talk to, like bi-weekly about things. And then all of a sudden, they'd kind of decided that I could cope on my own now, and I really didn't think that I could.
I've learnt by going through this that you need strong family members to support you. You need a good network of friends. You need not to be afraid to ask for help. That is the worst thing possible. Do not be afraid to go out there and say, I can't cope with life.
There is still a bit of a postcode lottery in mental health care and in just general sort of psychological support services. But broadly, there are online and real life support groups for people who've experienced anxiety. There are websites, a lot of websites with good information available. Anxiety UK is one of them. So there is help for people.